have an announcement to make, everyone. I have an announcement. Today's episode of Wartime Breakfast, Lunch and Dinner is dedicated to a fabulous subscriber, always cheering me on from the sidelines, always one of the first to comment. Gara lady, this one's for you. Hi everyone, my name's Jake. Welcome to the Kitchen Scrap, where I'm currently challenging myself to learn to survive on British World War II rations for an entire year.
You're clearly insane. You should be in an asylum.
Hello again, friends. I'm so happy to be back. Although I admit that I am coming to you now with my tail between my legs. It's been a while. I truly never intended to take a break from social media. It just kind of ended up happening. But I do apologize that it has taken me this long to upload another video.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're sorry. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry.
So let's address the elephant in the room. Where have I been?
Where have you been all my life? Where have you been? Where have you been?
Believe it or not, I was abducted by a group of highly advanced multidimensional beings who were studying my DNA in order to assist with the evolution of human consciousness. No? Alright, how about I won the lottery? I've been laying by the pool, I have 1 million friends.
Liar!
Alright, fine, I don't have any friends or money. How about I was taking a really long nap?
You're a walking lie and I can see right through you.
I don't suppose any of you are buying what I'm selling here, right? Ow! Alright, the truth. God. I'm afraid the truth is really quite boring and uneventful. I've just been really busy working. How boring is that? So around the time I posted my last video, which granted was back in August now, I'm sorry, both of my jobs became insanely busy. So for a majority of that time between August and the end of October, and some weeks in November as well, I was predominantly working 6 days a week, with Sundays being my only day off most of the time. Now, when you only have 1 day off a week, you basically have to cram your entire life into that one day. And if there was a social commitment that day, which sometimes there were, it was just like, the day's gone, it's time to start your work week again. So towards the end of September, when I realized this wasn't going to let up anytime soon, I just kind of gave into it and embraced it. But as a result, and to my own detriment, I might add, any downtime that I did have, I found it really difficult to find the motivation to get behind the camera. But never fear, we're back. But I'm very sorry to have kept you all waiting, and I hope that you can forgive me. Social media is a funny thing. I've never had any real presence worth mentioning on any platform, and this channel is my first kind of foray into the world of content creation for YouTube. So when I'm making and editing the videos, I'm so in the zone. I'm like, yes, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I love it. It satisfies that creative urge in me. What I've noticed is that if I don't feed that urge constantly, like every few weeks or so, there's another part of me that kind of takes over, and I step back and I'm like, no social media. This is lovely.
I need some props.
So I guess what I'm trying to say, probably very poorly, is that I'm a huge advocate for, every now and again, just taking a step back and having a break from social media. It's like a little palate cleanser. And then you can come back recharged and refreshed. All right, let's talk rationing. After all, that's why we're here. I'm sure a few of you may be wondering if I've stuck to the rationing during my YouTube hiatus, and the answer is yes, I have. It's pretty much been business as usual, but I'm not gonna lie, there have definitely been a few slip-ups and some slight adjustments. First of all, the bread. Now, many of you will already know that I was making my own wartime loaf to kind of replicate the experience of eating the national loaf throughout my challenge. Guys, after 10 months of that, I just couldn't do it anymore. Now, this was mainly due to time constraints while I was working 6 days a week. It was just becoming quite bothersome to have to make my bread on top of everything else. So yes, after 10 months, I have gone back to buying my own bread. And of course, back then, people were actually buying their own bread. But as I'm sure we all know, the type of bread that you were allowed to buy and eat back then was heavily regulated by the government. In case you haven't seen it, I did a whole video about the bread. I'll link it down below in case you're interested. So regarding the milk, you guys, I tried and I struggled so much to get by on 3 pints a week, which is the equivalent of 1.7 liters. As someone that generally consumes a lot of milk, This is the thing that I have struggled with the most throughout this entire challenge. Every week, without fail, I'd get to day 6 or 7 and I would have this much milk left to get me through. So here in Australia, you can either buy 1 litre, 1.5, 2 litres or 3 litre bottles of milk. So basically what I've been doing each week was buying a 2 litre bottle and reserving the last 300 mils for the following week's ration. But then one week towards the end of September, it was day 7, I had no milk left, and that was the moment that I decided I was going to allow myself that extra 300 mils each week. I know it's cheating, but I cannot tell you what a difference that extra 300 mils of milk makes each week. It's been a godsend, and I know that I can get by on 2 litres of milk a week. Honestly, everything else is pretty much the same. I've been very boring with my cooking. There's just been lots of soups and stews and vegetable dishes that were nothing to write home about. Basically, I didn't want to try anything too adventurous because I haven't been filming and I wanted to capture that on camera for you guys. I did actually make a second batch of the sausage dumpling soup recently, and it was just as good the second time as it was the first. Hands down, one of my favorite wartime dishes so far. So yes, while I'm still living on the ration, as I mentioned earlier, there have been a few slip-ups. Most of you will already know that I prefer a plant-based diet, and I've been using plant-based meat substitutes as my meat ration each week. So since I've been gone, there were 2 occasions where I used tofu as my meat substitute. Now, I'm pretty sure they didn't have access to tofu back then, but it is a good source of protein. So yeah, I did use it in a stir fry, but what made it especially naughty was I also used Hokkien noodles. Naughty J. I'm not gonna lie though, it was so good. Oh, I've still given up the coffee. Very proud of myself for that one. I honestly didn't think I would make it through an entire year without drinking coffee. Once you reach a certain point, you just don't even think about it. It's actually been quite easy after those initial first stages. All right, enough chit chat. Let's crack on with today's recipes. Now at this stage, I'm still not sure what my initial introduction is going to be. So just in case I haven't mentioned it yet, this episode is dedicated to a longtime supporter of the channel. They've been one of my biggest cheerleaders since the channel's inception. They've been so incredibly kind and supportive in more ways than one. So I was trying to think of a way to thank them properly and thought it might be a fun, interesting idea if they suggested the recipes that we cook in this week's video. So they sent me a bunch of recipes to choose from and we came up with the menu idea together. So Garrett lady, this one's for you. Alright, it's breakfast time, but it's certainly not morning time. It's been a big week, and today is the only day that I have where I don't have to work and I have no social commitments. I worked at the bar last night, and by the time I got home, I was absolutely shattered. So as soon as I got home, I just went straight to bed. And today I gave myself permission to have a lovely sleep in and slowly and casually start my day. But I am getting quite hungry now, so it's time to cook. Now, this week's breakfast recipe is the tomato and rice pie. It's a very loose interpretation of a pie, but I think it's going to be a cracking dish. So this recipe comes from a wartime cookbook called
Good Fare, a book of wartime recipes produced by the Daily Telegraph.
It's actually the follow-up book to Good Eating, also produced by the Daily Telegraph. Now, I actually don't have a copy of this one, but I was sent the recipe. So for this recipe, you will need 1/4 pound of rice, 1 pound of tomatoes, 2 onions. Now, I currently only have half of an onion. The other half I used in the dinner recipe, which has already been filmed at this stage. So in lieu of not having enough onions for this dish, I've just bulked up the tomatoes. Some dripping or margarine to cook with, a little bit of parsley, a little bit of seasoning, and it also calls for cheese sauce. Now, I also made a cheese sauce in the previous episode, so I just went ahead and used the same recipe for that. But just in case you missed it, I melted 1 ounce of margarine, then I added 1 ounce of wholemeal flour, and I just cooked that down a little bit, before I gradually started adding 3/4 of a pint of milk. Then I added 1.5 ounces of cheese, reserving a little bit to sprinkle over the top of the finished dish. And this recipe yields just under 2 cups of cheese sauce, which is actually perfect because our lunch recipe requires a cup of white sauce. So I figured I may as well kill 2 birds with 1 sauce. I'm really excited to try this combination of ingredients, so let's get cooking. So 1/4 pound of rice works out to be about 3/4 of a cup. I've got half an onion and just over 1.5 pounds of tomatoes here. So first I'm just gonna get the rice on the go and then I'll prep the tomatoes and onion. So I'm just heating up a splash of oil in the pan. In the time it took me to slice up all of the tomatoes and the onion, the rice finished cooking. All right, so we're just gonna start by frying off our onion. Now we can add all of our tomatoes. A little tip that Frugal Joe taught me, turn the knife over so the sharper side will remain sharper for longer. Thanks, Joe. And I'm just gonna cook this down until some of that tomato juice reduces. Okay, so I've just turned off the heat. I let these cook down for about 7 minutes. There's still a little bit of juice in there, but that's what I want because the rice is going to absorb all of that lovely tomato flavor. Now we're just going to add the rice. Just mix that all through. I did also season this with some salt and pepper. Now I'm just gonna add about 3/4 of a cup of this delicious cheese sauce. Seriously guys, this is so good, I could just eat it with a spoon. So there's still 1 cup's worth of cheese sauce in there, which I'm going to use for the next recipe. Just mix that in. Just gonna add a little bit of parsley as well. Now I'm just gonna spoon this into a pie dish. So I'm just gonna finish it off with the remainder of our cheese ration for the week. So with what I just sprinkled on top and making the cheese sauce, that was our entire 2 ounces of cheese for the week. So I've got my oven on 180. I'm just gonna pop this in for about 10-15 minutes to finish it off. Okay, so the tomato and rice pie is finished. I let it finish off in the oven for about 15 minutes. It's been resting for about 10 minutes now, but it smells gorgeous. I cannot wait to tuck into this one. So let's give it a go. It's still very hot. That is absolutely delicious. The rice and tomatoes are both cooked perfectly. It's creamy, it's salty, and the tomatoes just give it a lovely sweet freshness. Very happy to be eating this. This is really, really nice. I can safely recommend it. Go and give it a try. All right, it's time to make our lunches, everyone. I'm excited and I feel relaxed and I'm ready to party with the best of them. And I'm gonna go down to the river.
I don't know where that came from. That was weird.
I don't know why I am the way I am. Moving on. This week's lunch recipe comes from
Good eating. Suggestions for wartime dishes by the Daily Telegraph.
Now we're going to be making semolina gnocchi, or as I like to call it, gnocchi. Now there are 2 versions of this recipe. A simpler one with some cheese, which we don't have any more of, or served with vegetables. That's the one that we're going to do. For this recipe, you will need 2 ounces of semolina. I've never cooked with semolina before, so this should be interesting. 1 reconstituted egg. I'm just going to use a real egg. Half a pint of fresh or household milk, or milk mixed with water, a cupful of white sauce. Now we have the leftover cheese sauce to use in this recipe. 2 leeks or onions. I only have 1 very small leek. It's going to be fine. Parsnips, swede, a few carrots, salt, pepper, and dry mustard. Now there are a couple of processes for this one, so let's get cooking. So first we have to bring half a pint of milk to the boil, which is approximately 284 mils. Pour that in. Once that's boiling, we need to add 2 ounces of semolina. Doesn't really look like much, does it? I just purchased this one here. It's a coarse semolina. A 1 kilo bag only cost me like $2.50. So we'll have to make sure we find some other uses for the rest of this. Now the milk is starting to come to a boil, so I'm just going to add the semolina. Give that a stir. Now, I do have a proper whisk, but I always go back to using this one. It was just the attachment of some kitchen appliance, and I have no idea which one. Whoa, that got thick super fast. I did say to cook this slowly. The heat's down low. I think this is a job for the old trusty wooden spoon. It's so much thicker than I thought it would be. How do I know when it's cooked? I need to Google this. So Google said it takes anywhere between 10 and 20 minutes to make a semolina porridge, which is essentially what we've kind of done. This has only been on the stove for a couple of minutes, and it's already crazy thick. I think I'm gonna add a little bit of water to this just to be on the safe side. And just try and mix that water into it. I mean, we still need to add an egg to it. Do you think the semolina we have today was similar to what they had back then? I don't know. I'm kind of satisfied with that. What do you think? I'm just gonna add about a teaspoon worth of salt, some pepper. All right, now we're gonna add the egg. Whoops. Got some shell. Mix this through. That's not too bad. Next, we're supposed to pour this into a greased baking tray and let it cool. I haven't greased mine, I've just used some baking paper. I'm hoping it'll be okay. Pour this out. And it's supposed to be ½ an inch thick, so I'm just going to use an offset spatula here to try and spread it out. At this stage, it looks like a cross between scrambled eggs and mashed potato. So I'm going to let this cool in the fridge while we prep our veggies. Okay, so we have 1 very small leek, especially considering the monstrosity that we had in the previous video. 2 2 parsnips, 2 carrots, a small swede, and I had some leftover spinach in the fridge, so I figured I may as well use it up. Now, who wants to watch me peel and chop these vegetables in real time? I'm just kidding. Alright, all my veggies are prepped. Holy crap, you guys, those parsnips, the insides of them were so hard and woody. I had to pull out the big mama knife to chop them all up. I literally broke a sweat cutting parsnips. I'm definitely supposed to have about triple the amount of leeks, but we're just gonna work with what we've got. Next, I'm just gonna steam the vegetables. I don't wanna cook them the whole way through because we're going to finish them off in the oven. Alright, I'm just gonna get these on the go, and I'll see you when they're done. Okay, so the veggies are definitely done, probably a little overdone if I'm being honest. Now I'm just reheating the cheese sauce that we made. Now the recipe said to add some dried mustard to the grated cheese, but we don't have any grated cheese, so I'm just gonna add a little bit to the cheese sauce instead. About a teaspoon's worth. Mix that in. Get out any remaining lumps while we still can. Right now, it's time to prep the semolina. Okay, I've just taken it out of the fridge. It seems like it's set. It is a bit soft and squishy, but it looks like it's going to peel off the baking paper just fine. All right, the recipe says to cut it into fingers or squares. I'm gonna go squares. There's definitely a few lumps in this. I think this is going to be a little bit messy. We'll just go down this way. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. Okay, next the recipe says to place the leeks in a greased fireproof dish. Dice the other cooked vegetables, place them in with the gnocchi in layers over the top of the leeks. Sprinkle each layer with some grated cheese and mix with a little dry mustard. So we've already kind of taken care of that step. Pour over the white sauce, sprinkle the top with cheese, which we don't have. Heat thoroughly and brown in a hot oven. Serve with potatoes baked in their jackets. So I actually already baked some potatoes earlier today. So let's assemble this thing. So I've just gone ahead and greased this with a dash of olive oil. So first we're supposed to layer in the leeks. Next we can start spooning in our mixed vegetables. I guess we'll just start placing in some of the gnocchi. It's quite sticky. So since it's been sitting out, it's kind of softened up a little bit. I think I need a knife. Yep, I'm not gonna have pretty squares. I'm just gonna have clumps of semolina. But at the end of the day, it's the taste that matters and having a full belly. Honestly, I think I needed to let it set a bit longer, but it is what it is, my friends. So yes, at this stage, you're supposed to sprinkle it with cheese that has been mixed with some dry mustard. I'm going to put a little bit of spinach in there, a few more leeks, some more of our root vegetables, and some more of our gnocchi. And then just try and get the rest of this. Last of the spinach, the last of the leeks, the last of our root vegetables. I mean, this is going to be a pretty healthy dish. And now we're going to top it with our cheese sauce. Look at that. Oh, I just tasted the cheese sauce and that mustard is really coming through. Was not expecting that. I'm just gonna chuck this in the oven for like 15, 20 minutes? I don't know. Right, I ended up baking it in the oven for about 15 minutes. We've got our baked potatoes on the side. It smells phenomenal. It's cooled down a little bit now, so let's give this a whirl. All right, I wanna try and make sure I get a little bit of everything. Let's give it a go. Flavor is fantastic. I may have slightly overdone it on the mustard, but it's still really good. The semolina gnocchi literally melts in your mouth. It almost evaporates. It's quite strange. Even though I cut out the woody centers from those parsnips, they're still a bit chewy. I probably should have cooked them separately for longer, but overall, this is a really nice dish. I just got a mouthful with our crunchy parsnip and it's so much better. All right, I'm gonna wrap this up and whack it in the fridge because it's currently 2 a.m. and I have to work at 10 o'clock in the morning. Yay for me. I'll see you at dinner. We have a date, don't forget. Alright, it's dinner time, and tonight we're having
cheese ball pick-me-ups, accompanied by miniature franks, and for dessert, marshmallow kebabs.
I wish. Tonight we're going to make something that I've never actually eaten before, which is a fish flan. Or is it flan? Flan? Flan. Flan flan. I'm just going to call it a fishy flan flan, because I'm an adult, okay? Now, I actually don't have a copy of the book that this recipe comes from, but it was sent to me, and you can find this recipe in
Marguerite Berton's We'll eat again.
So for the filling, you will need 2 tablespoons of chopped onion, half an ounce of dripping, 3 tablespoons of flour, 1 teaspoon of paprika, half a pint of milk or water, a teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of vinegar, 1 pound of white fish which has been steamed and flaked, and some chopped parsley. Now we also need to make a pastry, and I thought it might be interesting to make a potato pastry because I've not done that before. So I found a recipe for potato pastry in none other than
Food facts for the kitchen front.
For this recipe, you will need 8 ounces of sieved cooked potatoes, so mashed potato essentially, 4 ounces of flour, half a teaspoon of salt, and 2 ounces of cooking fat, and of course a little water to mix. I'm excited to get stuck into this one, so thank you, Garrett Lady, for suggesting it. So, let's get cooking. Okay, so I've just measured out 4 ounces of wholemeal flour. I've got half a teaspoon of salt there. I just cooked and mashed some potatoes before, so this is 8 ounces. And we have 2 ounces of margarine, so we're just gonna add that in. Start bringing it together. Now we're just gonna add our potatoes. This has made a really soft and silky dough. It's quite lovely. This dough is quite moist, so I am just gonna flour the surface. Push this neatly into the pie dish, trim the edges. Done! I think that was the easiest pastry I've ever made. We have ended up with some extra pastry, so I'll have to come up with a way to use this. This is the baking paper that we use for the mushroom shortcake, so I'm just gonna reuse that. Put some baking beads in it to weigh it down. And now we're just gonna bake this in a hot oven until it's cooked. Next we have to steam and flake the fish. Now the recipe calls for a pound of white fish. It didn't specify. I was actually just gonna buy some cod or something of the like, but they didn't have any where I went. So I ended up just purchasing the cheapest white fish that I could find, which happens to be something called bassa. Now to be perfectly honest, I'm not entirely sure if they would have had access to bassa fish back then. Bassa is a species of catfish, which is actually native to the Mekong River. So it's very popular in Asian style dishes, but it only cost me $10 for the whole pound, which I thought was pretty good. So I'm just going to chuck this in the steamer. I'll just check on it periodically and give it a few turns until it's cooked. Okay, so the fish is done. It only took about 12 minutes, so I'm just flaking it up now. It smells nice.
Yeah, something stinks around here, and it's not the fish.
So we're just going to put this aside now and move on to the sauce that's going to bind all of this together. Okay, so I've just got half an ounce of margarine. Now the recipe called for 2 tablespoons of minced onion. I just chopped up a quarter of an onion, which ended up being more like 3 tablespoons. So the recipe states that we should fry this in the fat for 5 minutes without browning. So I've just got my heat on low. Okay, so they've been cooking for about 5 minutes. Next I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of flour. This is just wholemeal. Next we have to add in a teaspoon of paprika. I only have smoked paprika. It's going to be fine. Add in about a teaspoon worth. Next we have to add in half a pint of milk and water. Now I've already mixed this. I think it's 118 mils of milk and 118 mils of water. Just a little bit to begin with. You can really smell that smoked paprika. It's gorgeous. That thickened up so quickly. Add the rest. Now we're supposed to bring this to a boil and let it simmer away gently for 5 minutes, stirring constantly. You guys, I totally forgot about the pastry in the oven. I think I caught it just in time, but it is a little well done around the edges, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, so this sauce is lovely and thick. Next we have to add a tablespoon of vinegar. Oh, that smells really good. A teaspoon of salt. And because I'm a little bit extra, I'm gonna add a dash of cayenne. I don't know if you can see that, but I burnt my finger hastily trying to retrieve the pastry out of the oven. Now we're going to add the fish and just bring that all together. Gosh, it really hasn't made much filling. I think we'll be lucky to fill half of the pastry with this. First impressions, that smoked paprika is really shining through with the faintest hint of vinegar. And now we're just going to pour it into the pastry base. Just want to make sure I get every last little bit. Spread it around. It's definitely not a full flan, is it? Full flan. I mean, if I had a smaller baking dish or a smaller pastry ring, I'm sure it would have been plenty. And last but not least, we're just going to sprinkle it with some parsley. So there you have it, guys, a fish flan flan. Now it's actually 11 o'clock at night. I've already had my dinner, so I'm not actually going to taste the wonder that is this fish flan flan for the time being anyway.
Eat your fish, eat your fish, eat your fish, eat your fish. What the
I'm going to be stuck working late in the office for the next few days, so this is going to serve as my dinner for when I get home. So we'll taste test tomorrow night instead. Alright, it's the next night. I've just come home from the office. This is my very humble dinner this evening. Unfortunately, I completely forgot that I didn't have any green vegetables to accompany this. So yeah, it's a very simple dinner this evening. We've got a slice of our fishy flan flan and a few leftover baked potatoes from my lunch the other day. Anyways, let's give this fishy flan flan a taste. So there we go. Smells good.
Eat the fish, bitch!
Alright, let's go. That's really nice. The potato pastry is a little bit softer and chewier. I'm not sure if that's how it's meant to be or if that's because it's the next day, but it's still delicious. You can definitely taste the fish, and there's just a hint of vinegar shining through, which is actually quite lovely. It's definitely got a cayenne kick to it. I would definitely make this again. However, I think next time I would probably do smaller individual tarts and snack on them for lunch. That is delicious though, so if you happen to have some fish available, give it a go. Haha, you thought I was done cooking, didn't you?
Admit it! No, you admit it.
I was thinking the other day that since I created this little wartime breakfast, lunch and dinner series, I haven't really had an opportunity to showcase any wartime sweet or dessert recipes. Not that I've made any recently, but I was digging through the archives the other day and I came across a recipe that I filmed at the end of my very first week of rationing. It was a recipe for potato and jam biscuits. So I thought that might be something fun and a little extra to include in this video. Today I thought we would actually make something weird from ye olde faithful cookbook here. I came across a recipe for potato biscuits. The first ingredient perplexes me because it actually calls for 2 ounces of dried mashed potato.
What does that even mean?
I don't know what that means. Are they talking about dehydrated mashed potato? Like the stuff you get in the bag and you just add water? I don't have any of that. I do have real mashed potato, so we're just going to use that instead. So, for potato biscuits, you will need the following: 2 ounces of dried mashed potato, 1 ounce of margarine or cooking fat, 1 ounce of sugar, 4 ounces of flour, a pinch of salt, and 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. Underneath it says a beaten egg or milk for mixing. I like how it suggests a beaten egg or milk. Then in the recipe it actually says add the sugar and mix all to a stiff dough with the egg and the milk. I can't afford the milk. I've got like that much left, which will just get me through a few cups of tea tonight, and then it's over until tomorrow. So anyway, let's get cooking. Okay, so in this bowl I have already measured out 4 ounces of flour, 1 ounce of sugar, a little bit of salt, a bit of baking powder. Give that a bit of a stir. Next it says to add the margarine, so that is 1 ounce. It says to rub it in with your fingers, which is what I'm used to. It feels so good, I highly recommend it. Next we are adding 2 ounces of mashed potato, which I measured out before. I thought there would be more, to be honest. I'm going to mix that in as well. Make sure it is evenly distributed, get rid of any lumps. I don't think we're gonna need milk because this feels like a wet mixture as it is, and I still have to add the egg. That is crumbly. Just gonna add 1 egg, which has been lightly beaten, and just mix it into a dough. Make sure you get all of that. Don't waste a drop. That is sticky. I am going to add a bit of extra flour because that is such a wet dough. So just gonna get out some wholemeal. I'm just gonna gradually add it and see how we go. Looking better and better all the time. Oh yeah, I forgot to preheat the oven. As with most of these recipes, it doesn't actually give me a temperature. It just says a moderate oven. I'm not sure what moderate would have been back then. And it also doesn't give me any times. It just says until they are lightly golden. It's very sticky. I really think it was meant to be dehydrated potato flour. Now, it's gonna give this a bit of a roll. Yes. Now I think I'm definitely going to lightly flour the surface for this one just because it is such a wet dough. Next, we're going to cut some out. So we're going to cut an even amount and then we're going to cut the center out of half of them because we're going to put jam inside, which the recipe doesn't mention until the very end. So let's get these done and dusted. We're going to just cut the center out. Some of these are so thin. So these will be the bases and these will be the tops. So the jam will be exposed. All right, so they're out of the oven. They have cooled down. A broke one. We are just going to spread these ones with some jam. It's the spiced apple jam that my mother gave me. So let's give this a go. Not too much. All right. That's really good. Put these together now. There we have it, potato jam biscuits. So these baked in the oven at 180 degrees, fan forced for 20 minutes. I was only aiming for 15, but I got sidetracked. A little bit overdone, so 15 minutes should do it, I reckon. These look pretty nice. I'm gonna give them a go. All right, let's try one of these babies. Oh, that's crunchy. Yum, they're really good. They have a nice crunch to them. I think, yeah, definitely 15 minutes will do it. That spiced apple jam. Oh, yeah. Honestly, they just taste like the ones you get from the store, you know, with the little blobs of jam in them. We'll definitely make again. I'm really glad that I used my 1 egg this week to make these. The problem is, these are not going to last 48 hours. I can guarantee it. But we'll see. I'll try and restrain myself. So, there you have it. Potato jam biscuits. Okay, back to present time, Jake, now. So while we're on the topic of the potato and jam biscuits, the day that you make them, they will be crunchy. However, the next day, they will get a bit soft and chewy, which I actually didn't mind. Doesn't affect the flavor whatsoever. And I have made them a couple of times this year. They're very Moorish. I've mentioned this in a previous video as well, but sometimes my mum likes to test out some of these wartime recipes as well, and this was one of them. But remember when we made the wartime Nutella out of potato, cocoa powder, and sugar? Like me, she ended up putting a little bit of fat into hers as well, because once you add the fat, you basically have a bulk of the ingredients for the potato and jam biscuits. So she used the chocolate wartime Nutella as a base for the potato biscuits. She didn't put any jam on those ones, but it really didn't need it. They were very tasty. So it just goes to show how versatile these recipes actually are. All right, let's break down some costs. Okay, when it comes to the tomato and rice pie, we did have to make that cheese sauce, but I used just under half of it for this recipe, but let's just split it down the middle for the sake of ease. So the cheese sauce cost me $1.30 to make, but if we halve that, it's only 65 cents. Everything else for the tomato and rice pie came to a total of $4.35. So once we include the 65 cents for the cheese sauce, we have an even $5. Now I ended up getting 4 breakfasts out of that, so that was $1.25 per serving, which is not too bad, and I'd definitely like to revisit that recipe. Moving on to lunch, the semolina gnocchi, including the cheese sauce, came to a grand total of $11.24. Again, it's coming down to that expensive fresh produce, with the 2 parsnips alone costing $3.36. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this wasn't my favorite dish, but it was definitely nothing to grumble at, and the fault was definitely mine because I put just a little bit too much mustard powder into that cheese sauce, so it was very overpowering, so none of the other flavors could really shine through. I would definitely give it a second chance though. Moving on to dinner, the fishy flan flan was the most expensive dish of this video, coming in at a total of $15.75. The big ticket item here is obviously the cost of the fish, coming in at $10. This was super yum. I really enjoyed eating this one. I got 4 servings out of it, which came to a total of $3.93 per serving, which is a little bit on the expensive side, but for something different, I think it was worth it. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I would like to revisit this one again as well, but just make smaller individual serving sizes, just so I could snack on it because it was very tasty. Last but not least, the potato and jam biscuits came in at a total of $1.76, so very economical. Now in my case, the jam was free because my mother gifted it to me. But if you've got some basic baking ingredients already laying around the house, with a little bit of effort and elbow grease, there's always something you can whip up. So the grand total of everything we cooked in this video came to $33.75. Now that covered 4 solid days worth of eating, bringing each day to a total of $8.43, which is not too bad. The one good thing about spring and summer is that most of the fresh produce tends to go down just a little bit, which helps to ease the burden of this cost of living crisis just that little bit more. Now on a more somber note, during my hiatus, we learned of our dear Maggie Smith's passing, and like millions of others around the world, I was absolutely devastated when I woke up and read the news that day. For anyone that's been hanging out with me here at the Kitchen Scrap for the past year will know that I featured Maggie Smith in almost every single video that I've posted so far. I've loved her since I was a kid. She's absolutely hilarious, and her body of work is incredible. But it's the cycle of life, isn't it? She was 89, which is, you know, a pretty good innings, especially considering she was still working well into into her late 80s. Nonetheless, it still doesn't make the news of her passing easier to deal with. But she's left behind a tremendous legacy, and I'm going to keep celebrating her on this channel, as I've no doubt she will continue to be celebrated around the world forever and always. So Maggie, wherever you are, we love you, we miss you. Thank you for everything. So before we wrap up, I just want to say once again, I'm really sorry for my abrupt absence from YouTube. It really wasn't planned. Life events just took over, but it's really not lost to me that you guys have been just as invested in this challenge and this channel as much as I have this past year, for which I am eternally grateful. And while there really aren't any words to convey just how excited I am that this challenge is nearly over, rest assured, moving into next year, there's still going to be plenty of Ration wartime cooking on this channel. It's definitely a passion, and I feel like there'll be more motivation to experiment next year because I won't actually be as restricted as I have been this year. So we can just go for it and cook whatever wartime recipes we want to, right? And I won't have to worry about running out of milk again, or cheese, or tea, or sugar, or chocolate. Now this, I can promise you, you will not have to wait long for the next video. In fact, as I'm talking to you now, I've already filmed and edited 90% of it. It's going to be uploaded just a few days after this one. So stay tuned, because something tells me you're going to enjoy it. Not only that, I'm simultaneously working on another video, which is going to be a wartime Christmas video. I really hope I can get that one out by Christmas, but I am going away for a few days over Christmas, and then I'm back at work on the 27th. So if I don't quite make it by Christmas, it'll probably just become the end of the year, end of the challenge wrap-up video. So there's going to be 2, maybe even 3 videos coming your way before the year's end. So if you've made it this far, thanks very much for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it. And thanks for being so patient and putting up with my BS. Love you all, and until next time, keep calm and take your own advice, Jake, and carry the f*** on.
Vulgarity is no substitute for wit.